This is Agriculture Today. I'm Samantha Bennett with the K-State Radio Network. Starting off this Friday's programming, we're beginning with a grain market update for the week from K-State grain economist Dan O'Brien. He shares the most recent market changes that occurred this past week and anticipates what may be to come with 2 impactful reports being released next week. Also ahead, congratulations are in order for the Kansas 4-H meat judging team that recently won their first ever national title. I'm joined by their coaches Katie Lybarger and Steph Witberler, who were so clearly proud of this hardworking team of kids, as well as 2 team members, Calley Stubbs from Wallace County and Lyle Perrier from Greenwood County. We end with this week's agricultural weather report from K-State meteorologist Chip Redmond. Chip shares that while this week was windy, dry, and warm, the weather system affecting parts of central and eastern Kansas today will bring in some cooler weather. That and more is coming up ahead on Agriculture Today. This is Agriculture Today. We are joined now by Dan O'Brien. He is our K-State grain economist for our weekly grain market update. So, Dan, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Samantha.
Absolutely. So let's start with some trade estimates. They're kind of showing that we've got some poor exports for most things currently.
Yes, on November the 9th, there'll be the next USDA crop production and WASDE report. And the crop production report's a big thing. In particular, we'll be looking at any changes the USDA may have made in their estimates of the size of this year's corn and soybean crops, and for grain, sorghum, and others as well. The USDA projected on their last report on October the 12th that we'd have an average yield of about 171.9 bushels per acre, and that basically 13.895 billion bushels, and the trade estimates have come out on average just slightly under that. Now, what's interesting also is that there have been some independent estimates come out separate from that in the last day or so that have projected that number higher. So we'll see. The USDA had projected 49.8 bushels per acre. Trade generally expects that, and just something very similar on the size of the crop. All these things are surprises. If there's anything other than pre-report estimates or changes from last year, it affects the bottom line ending stocks. So also coming into that report, the corn ending stocks on the October 12th corn supply-demand balance sheet estimate by the USDA was 1.172, and in general, the trade's expecting a little bit higher ending stocks, 1.2. Still, you're not anything near 2 billion bushels, which would be more than adequate supplies, and you're not at 1, which is crisis. So we're just slightly above crisis in terms of where we're at there. Soybean ending stocks, the USDA projected 200 million bushels ending stocks. Trade generally expects a little bit more than that. The thing that I wonder about on those upcoming reports on the 9th would have to do with these areas where our usage is really weak, and that would be on the export side, particularly for corn, for grain, sorghum, and for wheat. We're just really struggling to get much volume and movement there. Soybeans, strong movement, even with a good amount of business heading off to South America. So even with all that happening, still the USDA numbers or estimates from October for soybean exports seem to be online. But one factor, along with maybe a little bit more corn and or grain sorghum production being projected by the USDA, if that occurs, it would be the weakness in some of these demand items. Ethanol usage, feed usage, so far with what we see, all these seem to be holding up decently. We sure have strong bids. We see it in the basis levels out here in western Kansas and the western Corn Belt overall. So still strong demand. We're not giving up the ship in terms of keeping those enterprises alive, but just quite a bit of uncertainty coming into any of these reports. When you're in this situation where you have such tightness, then you just magnify the impact of any small changes. If you get a 50 million bushel change in ending stocks in a year of plenty, well, that's almost no impact. A 50 million bushel situation now, when we're so tight, has a pretty, what we call very inelastic response, very sharp jumps. So anyway, that's I think what we anticipate out of those reports. There are some international numbers to look at. In general, for the world wheat ending stocks, world corn ending stocks, world soybean ending stocks, pretty much the same, maybe a little bit lower for wheat, a little bit lower for corn, just a little bit higher for soybeans. But generally, I take that at these points when we're anticipating what's happening on the world side, unless unless we have a major crop shortfall here in the U.S. at this time of year, generally the world ending stocks numbers and production numbers don't change a lot. Unless we get down the road to a major drought in Brazil, Argentina, or someplace, we tend not to see a lot of changes.
Sure. And you mentioned, sometimes the smallest things make ripple effects. Have we seen that played out in terms of our own futures here in the U.S.?
Well, yes. On yesterday's closes, for instance, you see D's corn closed at $6.79 and that was down 8 cents. Well, the factors quoted on that have to do with some of the Federal Reserve's announcements of higher interest rates, some factor from impacts of what Russia may or may not do in terms of honoring now or extending down the road the trade deal that they'd had. I guess we'll call it a trade deal, kind of a trade corridor allowance for Ukraine grains. So that's there. You and I have talked here of late, and I think we're kind of ignoring some things just because there's too much to deal with, of potential rail strikes, of ongoing dryness in the Eastern Corn Belt that's affecting barge traffic. All these factors at play. So we have so much information that now we see an 8 cent move down on yesterday at for D's corn's now down at 679.5. November soybeans again now that's in delivery at 14.26 3/4, down 13. I would say that there's a little bit of carry emerging in the soybean markets, and what's odd about that to me is that so you're showing positive carry really 3 to 5 cents a month from January to May to July. And you see that at the same time that the Brazilian soybean crop is looking great. They've had moisture. There has been kind of a truckers slowdown strike in response to an election outcome down there, a major presidential election outcome. And in the short run, that would paralyze the country, if that were to continue. But we'll see how far that extends on. Just so many things going on. Argentina is very, very dry, and that's affected their wheat production, very, very likely to affect their corn production. But they've been dry, and now they've caught some rains, etc. And so we've got kind of the fog of market information coming at us that we're trying to sort ourselves through.
Absolutely, yeah. A lot happening at once, but honestly, it's been a year of that, right? So nothing new, I guess.
Lots of uncertainty and just all over the place. I would say that we have seen in cash markets, in response to what's happening with the barge issue in the Eastern Corn Belt, much less what could happen in rails, that suddenly soybean cash prices or cash basis levels in the eastern two-thirds of Kansas have gotten much stronger, particularly in Salina, Topeka, Hutchinson, Columbus. The top bids in the Columbus area, all either par or positive, the strongest one being at 40 cents over in Hutchinson. We were struggling below futures for a good long time. When I say par, I mean that cash prices are equal with futures. And of course, we continue to have really strong corn basis levels. That's no new story. Really pretty strong sorghum levels and not bad wheat levels for basis, ranging from the strongest being 15 under in Salina to the weakest being out here to the west in Garden City and Colby at 35 under. So to me, I watch the basis levels around the area to get some idea of when we have these demand pull surges. And it does seem like right now for soybeans, with the difficulty of getting anything down the river system, that soybean exporters from the Gulf are coming here to Kansas and to Nebraska, any place they can get hold of grain and not have to rely on river shipping, instead relying on rail to move it down to those areas.
Sure, and you mentioned a strong support of that basis in the East. Are we not seeing that play out in the West as much?
I'm surprised that it's not. Maybe they just haven't felt that they need to come here yet. So when I say here, my office is in Colby, but in the western part of the state, the two major markets we're watching, Hugoton and Colby, we still have soybean basis bids at Hugoton Garden City about 70 under, Colby at 50 under, but yet Salina even money, Topeka 25 over, Hutchinson 40 over, Columbus 16 over. So it does seem that this type of aggressive buying for us who can actually get them the beans down to the Gulf for export, that they're coming this direction. They don't normally do that. Normally it comes down the river system, but not this time.
So, Dan, we're seeing this because, like you said, the river system's not working at capacity right now. So we're using the railway a lot more. So if this railway strike ends up happening, what might that mean for basis that we see locally?
Well, in the short run, what's happened in the Eastern Corn Belt at the river terminals when now that they don't have barge capacity, their basis suddenly dropped substantially because they don't have a means of movement down to their primary demand center. So if a rail strike happens, I think that would have a large negative impact on grain basis in a lot of areas. Now, maybe you could argue here in western Kansas, we have a lot of feedlots, we have ethanol plants. Maybe it doesn't affect us as much as the more export-dependent areas. But generally, overall, if there's a rail strike that happens and people that gather these grains in and want to move them out by rail, suddenly they don't have an outlet, I think their prices and their basis levels would weaken substantially in the short run until it gets fixed.
Yes, yeah. And then I think you compared it to like compensatory gain in cattle at 1 week, where maybe that could be something that kind of similarly happens. But
some effort to recover.
Absolutely. Well, Dan, thank you so much for this update. And as always, I know you put together a bunch of notes in terms of the weekly grain market, things that you've noticed. You compile those and put them on Ag Manager. So tell listeners where they can learn more about that at.
That's on the Ag Manager website, www.agmanager.info. Just look under the grain markets section, and it'll be listed right there.
Absolutely. Well, Dan, as always, I can't thank you enough for your time and for this update.
Thank you, Samantha. Take care.
Absolutely. You as well. Once again, that was Dan O'Brien. He is our K-State grain economist for this week's grain market update. We will be back with more ahead on Agriculture Today. This is Agriculture Today. We are joined now by several guests, and they are members of a team that recently won big in a competition nationally. And they are members of the 4-H All-Star Meat Judging Team that were crowned national champions this year. We have with us their coaches. We have Katie Lybarger.
Hi, everyone.
And we also have Stephanie Witberler. She was also one of the coaches. Steph.
Hi.
Hi, and you guys are both students here at K-State. Katie is a graduate research assistant, and Steph is a senior, and they're both from the animal science department here at K-State. And then we also have two students that were members of the team. We have with us Calley Stubbs. She's a freshman at Butler Community College. So, Calley, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And we also have with us Lyle Perrier. He is a junior in high school. So, Lyle, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. And first and foremost, congratulations, team. What a win.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so coaches, let's start off with you guys. Tell us a little bit about this 4-H team.
So our Kansas 4-H All-Star team consisted of the top 10 individuals that placed at the Kansas 4-H sweepstakes this summer. This year, our team consisted of Calley Stubbs from Wallace County, Lyle Perrier from Greenwood County, Luke Fankhauser, also from Greenwood County, Gwyneth Fry from Bourbon County, Callan Smith from Barber County, Lillian Holtz and Liam Nichols, both from Ottawa County.
Excellent. So a big team that you guys were in charge of this year. What was that experience like as coaches?
It was a super rewarding experience being able to work with these kids. They were all super hard workers, so that made it really easy for us.
And starting off, were you expecting the team to be so successful? Did you realize you had a winning team as you were starting off, or did you realize it more and more into the season?
I think from the beginning, we knew we were working with a talented group of kids. It was pretty obvious from the very first beginnings of our practices, but it became super evident, I think the weekend before the contest, that we had a group of kids that was obviously very capable of winning the national contest. I've worked with a lot of young people throughout FFA and a few years in 4-H, and I have never met a group that worked as hard as these kids did, that also managed to still have fun. These kids were practicing from literally sun up to sundown the days leading up to the contest, and not only were they not complaining, but they still were having fun and learning a lot and taking a lot away from that experience. And so I think that is, to me, when it became obvious the talent and the potential of the group.
Is that what you think made this team so successful, was the fact that they were still having so much fun while they were learning all of this in preparation?
Yeah, I would say it's that while they were super hard workers, they had a super strong work ethic. Every one of them did. And they had fun while they were doing it. And it was also like constantly on their mind. They were dreaming about it and making jokes about it even when we weren't practicing. So, they were having a lot of fun while working super hard.
So it sounds like this group definitely had their eye on the prize then.
Definitely.
And one thing I might add to that is we had kids from all over the state on this team, and many of them didn't know each other before they joined this team. And so it was also cool. I really think that they had a bond as teammates that happened over a super short period of time. And so that was also something that was really special to witness as well.
Excellent. Well, congratulations again, coaches. We're going to talk to some of the team members now, but we have with us Calley and Lyle. So tell us a bit about what it was like preparing for this competition.
Well, every Sunday we'd have a virtual meeting and we'd discuss some classes, and leading up we started to work on sets of reasons. And then we went to Beef Empire Days in Garden City and worked out there, and that was super beneficial for everybody, just getting to see some classes in person and looking at IDs. And then we went and worked out for like a week before the national contest, which was a lot, but I know we all had a lot of fun and we all learned a lot, and it obviously paid off.
Absolutely. Lyle, what was the experience like for you leading up to the competition?
Our coaches gave us great opportunities, provided us with all the material that we needed to study, and they showed that if we would just stay motivated and work through it, that we could reach the goal of getting this. And so I think that just their motivation throughout the entire weeks leading up was what led us to where we got.
Excellent. Well, you guys came out on the other side winners, but of course with every competition there's some trials, right? So what was the hardest part of the competition for you guys?
I think our coaches can attest to that, was ID scores. You're supposed to have perfect ID scores to be able to place really well. So when you get really close, it's nice, but it's a little disappointing, like when you miss like 1 point away from being perfect. But we worked on retail ID a ton, which helped a lot.
I would agree with Calley there. Retail ID is identifying cuts, and so you have to name the species, the primal where it comes from, the number of the cut, and the cookery. And so you're expected to get a perfect ID score if you want to compete well. And so that's a lot of repetition, and that's something that's a hard goal to get, but it paid off.
Absolutely. And compete well, you guys did. You guys competed against 14 other teams in this national competition, which is crazy to think about. And going into it, were you guys like, oh, we've got this. We are well prepared. We are going to win this whole entire thing. Or were you a little hesitant to start with?
I was definitely nervous, but I feel like you're nervous every time you come into something that you're passionate about. But I knew that my coaches prepared me, and I couldn't do much more to prepare myself for the contest.
I couldn't agree more. Like the night before, I worry a lot, but I had to tell myself that we'd gotten everything we could to win this, and so we just had to go out and do the best we could.
Were you guys pep talking each other prior to starting the competition any? Was there any team bonding that really helped?
Yeah, there were some few, like we had our pump-up songs and we were pumping out in the van. And then we had some peanut butter M&Ms that we had at Beef Empire Days that we managed to save the whole time. And so we ate the peanut butter M&Ms that we had saved. And I think that's what pushed us over the edge.
Yeah, the M&Ms are what did it. And another part of it, we were having fun right up until, like, obviously we buckled down and got ready for the contest. But 15 minutes before the contest, we were still having fun with each other, keeping our head right up to the contest. So that helped a lot.
Lucky peanut butter M&Ms, I'm hearing, and some pump-up jams. What was your go-to song, Calley?
Probably Dixieland Delight.
Good one, good one. What about you, Lyle?
Mine's Stockyards.
Awesome. Well, it sounds obviously like you guys had a really fun time going into the competition and then throughout. In the end, when you were finally announced as the winners, what was that moment like?
Leading up to it, we heard our names winning certain sections, so we were like, okay, we're going to do okay. Okay, we're going to do okay. And then they finally called. I was like, okay, we did okay. We're good. We're in the clear.
I mean, it was surreal for a while. Like, it didn't even sink in until we were taking our pictures with our first place plaque to just realize that it all paid off, that we actually won. It was hard to believe.
And coaches, what was that moment like for you? You guys are the winning coaches of Kansas's first national 4-H team to win a competition like this. What was that moment like for you guys?
It was pretty teary-eyed, honestly. We'd obviously gotten really close with these students throughout this process, and so It was rewarding to be named national champions, but really I think the most rewarding part was seeing how hard that these students worked leading up and seeing that hard work pay off was more meaningful than the actual title to me.
I would echo what Katie said. It was super rewarding being able to coach a national champion team. I mean, not many people can say that. And knowing, I guess, that we gave them everything we could, all the resources to be successful, but then also knowing that they took those and they ran with it and they used the resources we gave them and they worked really hard and studied on their own time was honestly an even better feeling.
Incredible. A moment I'm sure you guys will all remember for quite a long time. And speaking of memorable moments, was there a favorite part of the competition for you guys?
Honestly, it was all a blast, but probably the van rides were super fun just because that was the time we kind of got to decompress and just talk with each other and joke around. A lot of memories were made then.
I enjoyed the meals a lot, being able to sit down with our team, and we ate great food all the way through the trip, and so talking and socializing was fun there.
What about you guys, coaches? Any favorite memories you'll take away?
I would also kind of say the van rides, like Calley said. It was super fun seeing everybody interact with one another, having fun, listening to music, still taking time to study in the van. That was super cool to see everybody working so hard.
Can't thank you guys enough for your time this morning. And just congratulations again, guys. What an incredible experience you all had.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Once again, those were members of the Kansas 4-H All-Star Meat Judging Team that were crowned national champs recently, and two of their coaches. Now a quick word from the Vice President of Communications at the Kansas Livestock Association, Scarlett Hagans.
Dan Hallstrom, President and Chief Executive Officer of the U.S. Meat Export Federation, will take the stage at the membership breakfast during the Kansas Livestock Association Convention, which will be held November 30th through December 2nd in Wichita. In his Friday morning presentation, sponsored by Elanco Animal Health, Hallstrom will explain how the U.S. Meat Export Federation is working to put U.S. beef on the world's table. He will provide an overview of U.S. red meat exports, focusing on which foreign markets have seen demand growth for U.S. beef over the last year and where the potential for expansion remains. Hallstrom joined the U.S. Meat Export Federation in 2010 as the Senior Vice President of Marketing and was responsible for coordinating programs promoting U.S. beef, pork, and lamb in 18 regions around the world. He was named President and Chief Executive Officer in 2018. Prior to USMEF, Hallstrom spent 27 years with Swift & Company. The early registration deadline for this year's KLA convention is November 11th. Members can register online by going to KLA.org and clicking on the Events and Meetings tab, or by mailing in the form found on the website or in the November-December Kansas Stockman. I'm Scarlett Hagans.
Once again, that was Scarlett Hagans, the Vice President of Communications with the Kansas Livestock Association. We'll be back with more ahead on Agriculture Today. This is Agriculture Today. We are back now for our weekly weather report, and providing that, as always, is Chip Redmond, our K-State meteorologist. So, Chip, thanks for joining us.
Yep, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, let's start off with what happened in the past week. Was there anything significant that I missed?
No, it was a pretty quiet week overall. We didn't get much moisture, obviously, besides that little bit of rain there late last week. Other than that, most folks stayed high and dry, and our precipitation averages are falling this time of year. In fact, Manhattan area is down to about 0.4 of an inch a week on average, and that's going to keep falling more to the east, less to the west. So another dry week, and we saw temperatures kind of bounce around a little bit. We had some cooler temperatures last week, and now we've had several days of very warm temperatures. That's going to end fairly abruptly here with a stronger storm system. But those warmer temperatures have been as much as 15 to almost 20 degrees above normal. So that's pretty significant when we should be right now about 60-ish for highs and lows in the mid to lower 30s. Very, very warm conditions, and that's been amplified a little bit by the wind as well, where we've seen some breezy winds over the last few days. Thankfully, we've had higher humidities that kept fire danger out of a concern for most of the state. The far west still saw some issues. But that doesn't help when Combined with warmer temperatures, we have increased evaporation, even though plants aren't growing right now. We still see that moisture demand and drying out the soils very quickly.
Sure, and because of that, we've kind of seen drought expand this past week, right?
Yeah, we had drought expand this Thursday with the new drought monitor. We saw D4 and D3 both expand in central and western Kansas. Not much change in the east where, there's still some of those lingering effects of moisture, and then obviously with moisture in the forecast, it's influencing a little bit. We don't want to make a change just to completely switch it the following week.
Sure, and as this is airing, there's quite a bit of precipitation occurring here in the eastern portion of the state. Are we seeing that anywhere else?
Yeah, we're going to see this round of rain through Friday evening, and then we'll see another round on Saturday that will hopefully be a little bit more widespread. Even a chance of some severe weather in central Kansas, both today and into parts of early Saturday. And so, that moisture is beneficial. It's going to be more in the line of thunderstorm activity, and that can be really spotty and very localized. But overall, up to an inch to potentially an inch and a half, especially along the Missouri border, and less as we get further west. Unfortunately, most of western Kansas is once again going to stay pretty darn high and dry, and that's very unfortunate since some of the early forecasts we had earlier this week were very optimistic. With that storm system, kind of a classic La Nina, we see it kind of shift off to the east as we get closer. And so we'll take that rain, with 0.4 of an inch or average to about 0.6, 0.8 of an inch in the southeast. It'll still be above normal rainfall for them, and they need it just as much as the rest of the state.
Sure, and with that rain, can we expect any impacts on our local water reservoirs as a result?
Yeah, so a lot of the water supply concerns have been increasing as we get into the fall, especially places in eastern Kansas where it's not normally an issue in cattle ponds and that kind of thing. The reservoirs are hanging in there. They're managed water supplies, and after a very wet start to the summer there for a few weeks, the long-term water storage hasn't been a problem, but a lot of those individual livestock producers are really dependent on that surface water for their cattle. And they've been falling. They're not completely gone, but they've been falling quite a bit. This will hopefully give another boost to it. We're going to see quite a bit of runoff. You're not going to get great penetration because it's going to be heavier rain, not like a really light rainfall. And as a result, that increases runoff and also erosion, unfortunately. But will hopefully benefit the surface water supplies for folks going into the winter.
The next few weeks ahead, anything we can expect? Are we expecting cooler weather, I think you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, so we're definitely, with this storm system, we've gotten a change in the weather pattern, and it's going to open the door. We've got a lot of cold air that's building to our northwest. Montana and them are supposed to get record cold this time of year over the next 5 to 6 days. That is going to slowly start oozing into the Central Plains. That's not the scientific term, but it's going to move into the Central Plains, and we're going to have cooler than normal temperatures going into the middle of November. Unfortunately, keep in mind, cool air is typically dry air, and that won't bring much moisture, but at least we won't be having 20-degree above normal temperatures that really puts a stress on moisture demand.
Sure. Well, Chip, as always, we thank you so much for this update.
Yep, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Once again, that was K-State meteorologist Chip Redmond for this week's Agricultural Weather Report. We'll be back with more next week on Agriculture Today.